but also a generational divide. For people like myself, I try to keep up. I cannot live without my phone, but I realize that my phone start to correct me. So it's I still don't have those things integrated, but I know that it will happen, and we will need to use it. But we cannot let people not having access to internet, I don't even dare to say electricity, behind. That's why I am so hopeful about that side events that will be organized with those big powers. So I want to show you something. Those who know me, and Daniela online knows it very well. I am the co-chair of the Group of Friends for Sport for Development and Peace at the UN. And Monaco, decades ago, has established Peace and Sport, which is an NGO. And this is what Peace and Sport had produced when a country didn't have the infrastructures or the policy to have a sport on a curriculum. So from this, I want to show you now they don't use this anymore, and they use an application. This is that application. So with that application, they reach out to coaches. So what you're doing, training, educating people, the NGOs do it. Those are the relay on the ground. So I think this is what technology is about, good technology. So I am delighted that you're gonna have that conversation, and I will listen, because I know that we cannot escape it, and we need to protect people and bring those that have not have those opportunities on board, so the world doesn't get even more divided. So thank you so much for being here, and I will listen intensely to your discussions. So now, Nikki?
Yes. Ambassador Isabel Pico, first of all, thank you so much for giving us this space to be able to organize the side event, which is in the wings of the Summit of the Future. And space is in short supply for the Summit of the Future. And yours convening all of us is tremendous for UNITAR, the two divisions who put their elbows behind this event. Mihoko Komomoto's division and Prosperity, and Alex Mahia's division for people. And of course, the others who have put their efforts into making this a success. I want to thank the mission of Ecuador, the mission of Japan, the ISDB, the others I see here around me, including Mona and Amin, Deepya from Japan, and of course, our colleagues from Hiroshima and Hope. It's a great opportunity to get online. We have Ambassador Gallegos, the chair of the Board of Trustees. Thank you for being with us, Ambassador Gallegos. And we have Daniela Bass, a very eminent UN staff who is now, I think, back in Rome. So Daniela, thank you for being here with us too, and to encourage this intergenerational dialogue. And I see so many young people, and use this opportunity, young people, to interface with us, the slightly older generation, and to see how we can bring your ideas and innovation into what we have, which comes with age, which we think is wisdom, but I'm not so sure anymore, given the state of our current world, that the older generation is really the wiser generation. UNITAR, as you all know, I just want to give you a snapshot description. We believe change comes only with people's attitudes. When people's attitudes change, then society changes, community changes, we all change. But that's the most difficult thing to change, the way people think, their behaviors and attitudes. So we know it's a long-term effort. And we know we will be in this rut for a very long time, burrowing this lonely furrow. And we know that it will be ages before these changes take place, but we have to start. And I think one good thing I see, I've been around in the UN for many years, but this Secretary General has part this need for a better dialogue with younger people. We always thought that the politics around the UN and multilateralism was confined to the wisdom of age-challenged people. But now it's quite clear that by engaging younger people, we hope to get more dynamism into the work of the United Nations, to get the ideas and innovations. Because if we all look at our lives in the last 5 years, everything has changed so dramatically, powered by technology. You mentioned digital technology. Many of us in our generation are probably less savvy with the technology, its potential, and its applications than many of the younger people in this room. How do you bridge that? Because we know what needs to be done, but we're not so sure of the digital tools we can bring to the service of the change we want to see. So having this discussion on this bridge between the applications of digital technology for a world that's more inclusive, as you said, Isabel, that how do we use the technology? Because this technology, when you read about it, there are views are on the extreme. One view is that this is a very matrix-like end of the world scenario, which is being unleashed by these new technologies, especially by AI and generative AI, people talking about how the brain will be plugged one day into the cloud and we can live the world and the life we want to lead. It's very much like the matrix. If you just imagine the life you want to lead and what we've understood with life and prosperity and peace and happiness will be things of the past. This is on one extreme. And the other extreme says there's so much potential in AI to put it for people, to put it for prosperity, to put it in the service of humankind. Make technology your friend. Don't be so scared. The genie is out of the bottle. There's no way in which we're going to put technology back into that bottle. How do we make it a friend? How do we set the guardrails around this technology so that we can have the technology in service of the people? And there are so many people who need our help. I was seeing some statistics around the growth of and the realization of the SDGs. By 2030, we'll still have almost 600 million people in abject poverty. We have uncertainties on public health. Every few months, we see Mpox, we see Ebola, we see that COVID hasn't really fully disappeared, and the overhang of COVID is devastating country after country, especially our countries in the poor world. So we have problems with public health. Every day we read something dramatic about how this has been the hottest year ever. We see how global greenhouse gas emissions are the largest ever. So we are making a lot of promises, of course, in the United Nations and the agreements we reach. But the reality is so different from these promises we made that there's another gap to be bridged, the gap between promises and action. And how are we going to do that? And what have the young people to tell us in so many of these things? And what do they feel? Youth empowerment, we talk sometimes theoretically. It means getting the young people to meetings, getting young people on decision-making tables. But what do they see as their empowerment when they come to participating in global policy? I know Hope has worked a lot, for example, in the area of nuclear disarmament. I'm sure the young people don't even understand why is it that countries are pursuing these devastating technologies in the hope of obliterating each other one day? Is that the ambition of humanity in the 21st century? But they have to tell us, how do they see it? We grew up in a different world. We grew up in a world where the world wars had just ended. The Cold War had kind of given a certain stability to our and this balance of whatever it was called uh, gave certain security to people who were aligned to this group or that group. But is that how younger people are thinking today? Is that what nuclear armament and disarmament is all about? So there's so many issues which we have been pursuing over the years, over the decades, which need to be rethought. And how do we get to sustainable peace and prosperity? How do we get to improving public-private partnerships? You mentioned, Isabel, the importance of the private sector. Now, when you look at digital technology and you think who are the companies that are really powering technology, It's these trillion-dollar companies. You know, the trillion-dollar companies, including here, and especially here in the US and in China, they are really at the forefront of innovation, invention. Their CEOs sometimes don't even know what their technology departments are doing. What are they thinking? What is the element of competition? What is the element of cooperation? What is motivating the technologists who are working on AI? Is it just having a greater presence? Is it having a greater market share? Is it for realizing the 2030 agenda? It's mostly, as I see, the primary force of technologies, either in the defense and strategic industry, or it's in these big technology companies. So without the private sector, we are lost. We have to incorporate and make part of our venture the sector which generates 70% of the world's GDP. If we don't involve the private sector, what sustainable development goals are we talking about? What circular economy are we talking about? What disarmament are we talking about? What applications of technology are we talking about for the service of humankind? So I think your point of involving the private sector much more centrally in our efforts is probably something the UN has always been a little wary of the private sector. And that's part of our historical legacy. But I think time has now come to incorporate them very much as a central part of our work, especially when we think of issues like empowerment of women, the sustainable development in an environmental sense, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, of looking at biodiversity loss, looking at desertification. All this we need to involve much more than the people the UN traditionally has. Not that diplomats are bad. Ambassador, I was there one time. But diplomats live in a world of their own. And their interactions are with other people of the diplomatic community. Their interface is not necessarily with the people we are wanting to engage today in the United Nations. They don't necessarily engage with young people. They don't necessarily want to engage with the private sector. They don't want to necessarily engage with the civil society. When I was a young diplomat, when we were going through the motions of creating the UN Conference on Environment and Development and the Earth Summit, NGOs were not allowed to come to the rooms. They were on the beaches of Copacabana. They were in their tents of their own, 10 miles from the conference venue. But we've come a long way since then. You know, they are now in the tent and they are, so we've got to learn how to engage with them. Everyone wants a better world. It's not only the leadership of the diplomatic community in the United Nations, but we haven't changed our mindset yet. We feel that we are wisest, we can make the best declarations, we can spur actions, we can give inspirations. So I'm challenging all of you now. I'm saying provocative things because I know that the world has to think different. And that's UNITAR's long-term mission. And I hope our conversation today will spur that kind of discussions for a more inclusive world, for empowering the use of digital technology for the world we want, which is more prosperous, which is more peaceful, and which is more driven by the severe inequalities that our world has, not only in income, but between gender and so many other issues that our world is grappling with for so many decades. So thank you, Isabel, once again for hosting this wonderful meeting, and I wish you all a great morning.
Well, thank you very much for that provocative remarks. Well, from somebody who wrote the SDGs, I think we understand some frustration. You know, we all know that the General Assembly is an intergovernmental body. So it's always very difficult and challenging to have as many people from the outside to join us. Some delegation feel threatened. But I think this is a role of the SG and he's been doing it. And the UN Advisory Board on AI, this is something that, you know, if we don't accept it or don't create it in the GA, that the Secretary General takes the leads and as somebody or board advising him, then it can find its ways. And I think that now we know we need it. So, dear Ambassador Yamanaka, if you want to deliver now your remarks.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you, Ambassador, as well. It's a great honor to welcome you all to the important side event of the day's side event on behalf of the organizers. First and foremost, I extend my deepest gratitude to the Ambassador Isabel Pico for the Law Commission and Mr. Joseph, Executive Director by UNITAR, for their collaboration and dedication in organizing today's event. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guests and panel speakers who will share their rich experiences and expertise on the critical theme of shaping inclusive societies through digital power. Throughout the summit of the future process, Japan has emphasized the concept of human security, which places great importance on the protection and the empowerment of individual people, including the most vulnerable, as global threats to human security increases, including the armed conflict, violence, forced displacement, climate-induced disasters, and epidemic disease. It's essential to empower each and every individual so as to leave no one behind. When discussing empowerment, we must recognize the significant role that digital technology can play. Today's theme aims to ensure that everyone, including those in vulnerable and marginalized situations, can enjoy the benefits of digital technologies by eliminating disparities and inequalities and creating a more inclusive society. In this connection, I'd like to highlight Japan's support for two remarkable UNITAR programs that are making real impacts in this area. First is a UNITAR Digital 4IR training program for Ukraine women refugees in Poland, which has equipped over 500 women with essential digital skills such as data analytics, cybersecurity, and web design. The program's impact is clear, with 94% of participants planning to apply the new skills, illustrating the transformative power of digital education. Second one is that UNITAR developing essential digital skills for women and the youth in Africa program, which has trained some 5,000 participants from 24 countries, addressing the digital skills gap and fostering inclusive growth through webinars, business support sessions, and networking, and thereby enhancing the employability and the professional growth. These are just two of many examples from the field that we could further elaborate in terms of the applying role of digital technologies. And finally, I'd like to touch upon today's main theme, intergenerational dialogue for a sustainable future. I am very pleased to welcome Mr. Xian Li, youth advocate, who will serve as the moderators of our discussion. And of course, I expect them to discuss the great potential of today's younger generation. And also that my previous speaker, Mr. Sess, touched upon almost all the important the points which I prepared to touch upon, but he already covered all the points eloquently. So I have to limit myself to touch, try to add just another angle to today's main theme. Japan is experiencing one of the highest rates of age in the world. And it's one of our biggest challenges to create a society where older persons have opportunities to continue working and contributing to their communities if they so choose. And also many older people could serve as mentors to young people if given some proper training. Therefore, I like to emphasize the importance of the empowerment of the older persons to enrich international dialogue. And Japan's strong emphasis on investment in people aligns closely with UNITAR's mandate to equip people with education skills and knowledge. And by the way, this the phrase investment in people is a catchphrase of the Prime Minister Kishida. We look forward to deepening our collaboration and working together to empower individuals through I wish
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador. So I think now we're really entering into the core of the panel. And Mr. Exneria, Director from the Division for People and Social Inclusion at UNITAR, will moderate the panel, Bridging the Digital Divide, Harnessing Technology for Social Inclusion and Sustainable Peace. Alex, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. I sincerely express the appreciation of the UNITAR to Ambassador Pico, to Ambassador Yamanaka, and to our Assistant Secretary General itself. They have put already in perspective what we expect will be this actual dialogue, intergenerational dialogue, with the objectives that I'm going to mention. But before that, allow me to express also our appreciation to my colleague Mihoku Kumamoto, the Director of the Division for Prosperity, and to Ambassador Marco Suazo, the head of the UNITAR office in New York, for making this possible in this beautiful setting. You will all remember that we are here on the occasion of the Summit of the Future. The actual day is coming soon, the high-level meetings ensuing. But for those of you connected, for those of you that are not necessarily here or exposed to these things, allow me to share in very few remarks what is the pact of the future, which is one of the great outcomes, historical outcomes, if I may say, of the Summit of the Future. This document will be the product of an intergovernmentally negotiated, action-oriented pact with 5 sections. And it is very important to mention those 5 sections so we can indeed have our dialogue today. Number 1, sustainable development and financing for development. Number 2, international peace and security. Number 3, science, technology, and innovation and digital cooperation. Number 4, and more than relevant for today's discussion, youth and future generations. And finally, number 5, transforming global governance. The summit will also produce a global digital compact and a declaration on future generations, Resolution 76307, that will be indeed guiding us in the years to come. So within that bigger picture, the following panel that I will have the pleasure to moderate, as Ambassador already said, will have 5 speakers, all of them addressing a question that I will have the privilege of presenting to them. So without further ado, allow me to invite Ambassador Luis Gallegos, former Foreign Minister of Ecuador, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of UNITAR, and a great friend of the United Nations to 3 decades, if I'm correct, maybe more. Excellency, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Allow me to present the first question. How could we create an environment conducive to creating an inclusive society in terms of intergenerational dialogue, policies and regulations, incentives, investment, etc.? Ambassador Gallegos, you have the floor. Welcome again.
Thank you very much, Alex, for your introduction, your most kind introduction. Greetings, Isabel, my neighbor. I was a neighbor of Isabel for many years. I remember having been ambassador to New York 3 times, and we cohabited the same building, and we are old friends. Thank you very much to Marco Suazo and Mihoku Kumamoto for preparing this, and obviously my greetings to Nikhil, the executive director, and Alex. I would like to reference an issue that I find very important in the words of what the ambassador, permanent representative of Japan, has just said. I wear many hats in this issue. I am the president of the board of UNITAR, but I'm also the president of the Global Initiative on Aging Foundation. I belong to the group of 1 billion people who are aging in the world. And in 26 years, according to the demographic shift, we will be 2 billion people who are beyond 65. The world is in front of a radical paradigm shift in fertility rates and aging. And I think that undoubtedly this is one of the major concerns of the world. In my conversations with the Pope, with the Secretary General, and with other leaders of the world, I've told them my vision that the leaders and many the governments and democracies are not are reluctant to deal with such a complex problem, because we normally have two persons depending on each person who is aging. And therefore, the 2 billion people will have an impact group of 4 billion. By 2050, we will have 6 billion people in a community of persons who are aging, whose experience needs to be ratified and who need to contribute more in these days. And when you talk about technology, Alex, when you talk about inclusive societies, when you talk about the need for expertise in dealing with problems, I think we all have to look forward to what the Secretary General expresses in advocating, and that are in the background notes of this meeting. He says that the world we live in is characterized by a stark lack of inclusivity, leaving many groups such as women, youth, seniors, persons with disabilities, and minorities on the sidelines of decision-making. I would like to invite the issue for having more inclusive dialogue, more participatory dialogue. And I'd also like to make a point of emphasis on what Nikhil said about integrating the private sector. We have to open the doors of the United Nations for a broader discussion with civil society, with the private sectors of our countries, with those who are deciding in the future of generations to come. The generations to come will all age. And I think this is a major concern for all of us. In my expertise, I think that what we are talking about is inclusive technology. I am also the president of the Global Initiative on Inclusive Use of Information and Communication Technology, which we created on the basis of Article 9 of the CRPD, the Convention for Persons with Disabilities. Because 20 years ago, we foresaw the importance of inclusive technology to include these 1 billion persons who are aging and 1.3 billion people who are in the disability community. So I believe that we have a brilliant future if we manage intelligently to include all these people and make our societies more inclusive, more diverse, more inclined to looking at at differences as a contribution, not as an exclusion. Thank you very much for your kind question, Alex.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you for sharing your wisdom indeed. We will move now to the second speaker, Mr. Kunihiko Shimada, the Principal Director of Hiroshima Organization for Global Peace. Hope, what a good name to have. But before I present the question, let me just tell you something on behalf of my Assistant Secretary General. The relationship between UNITAR and Japan is very auspicious. Excellency, you know it, you have mentioned it. Both my colleague Mihoko Kumamoto and myself have served under Mr. Seth for 9 years, and I had the privilege of being in Hiroshima 3 years. So I simply wanted to welcome you with that warmth, and particularly with admiration for what Hiroshima means to the world. A beacon of peace, nuclear disarmament, and harmony. So we are delighted to have you here. Allow me to present the following question to you. Looking ahead to 2030, the year 2030, what role do you envision digital innovation will be playing in achieving the UN's goals around inclusivity, prosperity, and sustainable peace? What will success look like? Well,
thank you very much. It's my great honor and pleasure to speak on behalf of the Hiroshima Organization for Global Peace, so-called HOPE. And but one of the key words I would like to appeal to all of you is a visualization or virtualization of what had happened in the past. So the key question of the virtualization, if I may, I can show you some of the pictures. This picture depicts the situation of the city in Hiroshima days before the atomic bombing. But actually what happened on the 6th of August, that's the days after the 6th of August happened, the atomic bombings. This is the city of Hiroshima back in 1945. Whenever I have a chance to bring my friends, international friends, to the Peace Memorial Park in Hiroshima, many of them have told me, oh, you're lucky because that atomic bomb was dropped just above the park. But actually, I have to say, as you look at the first picture, that was in the middle of the city, the center of the Hiroshima city, where the estimated more than 350,000 people reside at the time back in 1945. One of the key challenges that the Hope is promoting at this moment is to try to visualize or maybe hand over the memories and stories and narrative to the next generations. In order to do that, the digital technology is can play the utmost important role. And since because of we still don't know exact number, how many people were deceased or killed in the accident of the 6th of August back in 1945. But at this moment, as of the end of the March 2024, we still have so-called hibakusha, we still have more than 100,000 people still alive. But unfortunately, most of them are reached at the age of 86 or maybe above the 86. So it's that we have the kind of aging among the hibakushas community. And also, due to some physical damage, or like the burning from the 6th of August back in 1945, almost 79 years ago, most of them refuses to appear before the people and before the public. They have maybe some issues of discrimination in the past or so on. Currently, in order to hand over the memories and stories, what had happened back in 1945, especially the disaster and catastrophe caused by the atomic bombing back in 1945, we, the Hiroshima, together with UNITAR Hiroshima office, we have some sessions to educate and also to have some the information session for the youth. So there are three different the things. And one is actually let them know about what exactly happening, the meaning of the learning about what happening caused by the atomic bomb. For the domestic high school students, we have the Future Leaders Program for Global Peace. So they use it's a kind of an English, the sessions for the high school students, trying to make some discussions with their colleagues in Japan regarding the meaning of the true peace and so on. Second one is the Hiroshima Junior International Forum. This also includes the international students coming to Japan and visiting Hiroshima, and also have the great discussion, the opportunities among the younger people. And the third one is together with the ICANN, the Hope and also Hiroshima Prefecture have organized the Hiroshima ICANN Academy, that also the annual event trying to let's understand the international peace and security issues, and also in relation to the disaster caused by the atomic bomb. But we also had a very special occasion for this year because of the year after the Hiroshima G7 summit, based on some initiatives and decisions made of the G7 leaders. We have the Peace Fellows and also Youth Fellows together with the UNODA and the UNITAR. So on the same day, the 6th of August in 2024, it's a few months ago, almost a month ago, we had the kind of youth forum and also even the summit among the UN Peace Fellows from the UNODA and together with the UNITAR. But in order to hand over some stories and memories to the next generations, the role of the digital technology is very important. But there are three different initiatives I can just introduce today. One is actually AI-based atomic bomb technology response device. Together with the young people who are educated from the Youth Forum and also Future Leaders Program for Global Peace and international forums, and we have collected more than 900 questions, both from related to the peace and security, but also as a human, quite a casual question that do you still, what's the meaning of the love for you? But anyway, based on these 900 questions are compiled, the young students selected from the Hope, I mean, they just had the chance to interview to the Hibakusha who were affected directly by the nuclear weapons back in 1945. And compiling some answers and also responses from those who were affected by the atomic bomb, Hibakusha, the NHK, together with the news of the NHK, the Nippon like a Hoso Kyokai, is kind of broadcasting company that they used the AI technologies to compile the AI image, artificial image of those victims from the atomic bombing back in 1945, to like create some visual image for the kind of a disasters and also some narratives among the people of the Hibakusha without exposing themselves in front of the camera. But actually, as I mentioned before, like more than the 350 people, or 350,000 people were resided in Hiroshima at the time of the Hiroshima atomic bombing. But the almost a 1/3 of the people, only like we have the 1/3 people remaining as a Hibakusha. And that's why like we would like to like the remain, keep the kind of visual image even after they deceased from the cancer and some other like the after effects and the side effects. So that's why like we would like to like hand over the visual image, because we believe that the hearing or listening to what they have talked is very important, and even reading the history over the book and the articles is also very important. But this cannot be like done, I mean, better than seeing the actual pictures or visual images to understand what exactly happened and what kind of message we have to keep. That's the first one. Second one is actually rebooting memories project. As I show you the picture, this is the black and white picture. But now, like with the memory of some of the people who are actually affected by the nuclear weapons, the young generation at the time, like the project, she was a 16 years old high school student, Ms. Anju Niwata, like there was a joint project and tried to run the project to colorize in the memories, rebooting memories using these kind of photos. Photo on the left, this is kind of original photo, it's a black and white, back in 1939. It's kind of family daily life. They're eating like they try to have photos. About the guy who's depicted in this picture, they hold in like cap of the kind of watermelon because he was so afraid of the camera flash because of the light. But the lighting happening like a few years later. On that day, the nuclear bombing, or the atomic bombing, he was maybe lucky because he went to the school far away from Hiroshima city epicenter and also the hypocenter. So that's why he was not affected originally on that day, but he lost all his of the families. With this project, the coloring the memories, rebooting the memories project by putting the color, using like the digital technologies. And this guy, like who were affected by who actually lost his family because his house was located only the 500 kilometers away from the hypocenter of the atomic bombing. But it's currently like that place is actually called the Peace Memorial Park, but it used to be like the Nakajima area. So this picture helped him to reboot his own memories because now, according to the report back in 2017, he was suffered from dementia and had difficulty speaking. But once he looks at the colorized picture, the memory came back to him. And he started to talk one word from another. So that also helps him to like reboot his memories and try to also share the stories to the later generations to tell and appeal what had happened before. So now this lady, like Anju Niwata, now she's working at the TV report in Hiroshima, and he still continues the same projects to colorize more photos of the victims or the families who were affected by Hiroshima atomic bombing. But another thing is, the final thing is using the 3D technology, the 3-dimensional technologies. Some of the buildings remaining even survived the nuclear bombing, the atomic bombing back in 1945. City of Hiroshima and the prefecture of Hiroshima prefecture still haven't made a decision how to use that remaining buildings. So 3 alumni from the Hiroshima Junior International Forum, and also some summit, and also they just also participated in international tour of the peace studies. The 3 ladies actually established a project of 3-dimensional things and tried to make a proposal how to use historic building affected by the atomic bombing back in 1945. Used to be used for the ad hoc nursing place to take care of the injured people from the bombing. But now it is kind of completely left. They left untouched. So that's why they just proposed to make it as kind of a message center and peace memorial using the 3D technologies, trying to revive what kind of how it looked like originally. Because it was for example, the clothing depot of the Hiroshima. So they used the remaining building as one of the peace museum to try to use the digital technology as much as possible and asking lots of questions to the younger people. What would you like to do? How do you react if you have the button to push whether they use that or not? And is there any kind of significant message to peace and so on? So it's kind of a discussion style using the artificial intelligence technologies and 3D technologies. So through these technologies, now the narrative projects especially try to show the younger generation what had happened, but at the same time, let them think about what would they do if they have a decision, they are in the decision position. But this also helps us include those who are affected, mostly around the age of 85, 86, Asian people, and also the older people into discussions together with the younger generations. I believe this is one of the ways to include all different generations into one same discussions, try to share their views. Younger generations can share their knowledge and also techniques using the latest technologies, including AI, but also the older people can share their living stories, what they had the experience by themselves. So with the belief of the kind of existence, with the existence of the nuclear weapons, there'll be no sustainable future in a truly matter. With that kind of motto, we hope we'd like to proceed and also try to disseminate our ideas around the world, which could be also included in the future discussion. Thank you.
Thanks. We thank Mr. Shimada and continue with the proceedings. I would like to have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Daniela Vaz, the president and founder of DB Sustainability Advisory Bureau. Daniela is an old colleague, someone that we sincerely admire, many decades at the UN, and now, if I may say, continues to be a global leading expert on the Sustainable Development Goals for social change. She is the principal of SAP, and an organization that provides advisory services on social development and sustainability. She is indeed a champion for inclusion and diversity, equity and disability, and inclusiveness as a whole. So, Daniela, welcome again. Allow me to present the following question to you. How could we leverage digital technologies to effectively engage different segments of society, from youth to senior, in shaping an inclusive society? What are opportunities and challenges faced to make it happen? Welcome, Daniela. I think you're muted. Daniela, I think you're muted. Apologies.
Unmute your microphone.
Yes.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whichever part of the world you are. Thank you. I just want to briefly thank Ambassador Pico for organizing this event and also having me as a guest, as a speaker. All honorable ambassadors present there, and also Ambassador Luis Gallego, with whom we had the chance to interact inside and outside of the United Nations who are still very much in contact. And also, of course, a former colleague who still has an amazing career, Nihil Seth from UNITAR as executive director. And of course, the moderator, Alessandro, I think, to recall. The question, very interesting. But let me first take you back in a bit to a key moment in my life. Because at the age of 6, I became paraplegic. And at that time, it really felt like the world had shrunk overnight. I'm 63, so more than half a century ago. But what I did not know then was that technology, innovation, and the power of human resilience would expand my world far beyond anything I could have imagined. So thanks to the advances throughout the years, the decades, I would say, in digital tools and also accessible infrastructures, not everywhere, but they are improving in terms of cultural infrastructures, technical and in technological infrastructures, physical infrastructures. Well, in any case, I was able to access quality education, work at global level, became a journalist, and so on and so forth. And today, right now, through the wonders of Zoom, I'm able to share my personal and professional experiences with you all. So I think this is really remarkable. And millions of people, once limited by various barriers, be that they were and are physical, geographical, societal, are finding ways to thrive thanks to the advent of digital technologies where they are available, though. Because these tools, when they're used wisely, can be powerful equalizers, but we also have to be extremely cautious, as they have the potential to deepen existing inequalities if they're not intentional about their use or available to some people or some countries. And please, let's not make an excuse that now because of internet and, you know, the possibility to work remotely, persons with some kinds of disabilities can work from home, because I don't want governments to become lazy and start not removing architectural barriers, okay? And say persons with disabilities are still employed. Now, sorry, but I had to say that. So the role of resilience, inclusion, and intergenerational dialogue in shaping a sustainable future, well, drawing from my personal experience as a person who is paraplegic, as a global leader, as a woman, and now I am in my early 60s, so as an older person, and, you know, have been responsible of mandates on youth, aging, family, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, cooperatives, and the sport for all, for peace and for development. And we're talking here today also about peace. So going back to your question, sorry, this was a big, how can I say, opening of what I want to say. One powerful example, let me use examples, okay? Is the use of digital platforms that integrate adaptive sports and fitness programs. For instance, AI-driven fitness apps are now incorporating features that make exercise accessible for all, including seniors and persons with disabilities or youth. Think about COVID, for instance, for those who had access to technologies. But we have here the ambassador of Japan. Japan, that already started doing that, I think back in the 50s, last century, was broadcasting daily through radio stations exercises that people could do at home during COVID. So this is amazing. This is also technology, the traditional ones. So these platforms are not just about physical well-being, though. They foster a sense of community and they bridge generational divides, in my opinion. So imagine a platform where a young athlete can share its fitness journey with a senior citizen participating in an adaptive sports program, for instance. And this not only promotes physical activity, in my view, but it also generates this intergenerational dialogue, helping youth learn from the experiences of older generations, while older adults stay connected and active in a very rapid changing digital world. So what are the opportunities? Opportunities lie in the ability, in my view, of digital technologies to connect people globally, breaking down barriers of geography, physical ability, and age. And so by designing platforms that are user-friendly and accessible, so here we should talk about algorithms now, that's another story. But, you know, using these user-friendly and accessible platforms, such as artificial intelligence powered adaptive interfaces for those people with certain kinds of disabilities, I believe we can ensure that no one is left behind. And this is something that should be and could be discussed during the Summit of the Future, because technology can foster intergenerational relationships through collaborative spaces where knowledge, experience, and innovation flow across age groups. Now, the challenge. The challenge is ensuring that those tools are designed inclusively from the start, because many artificial intelligence systems can unintentionally reinforce biases, particularly if they are trained on data that does not reflect the diversity of society. And so here we must also address the individual divide, the digital divide. Because as many seniors and marginalized groups may lack access to high-quality internet or the devices needed to participate, then here we have to think about education. Education and support programs must be implemented to ensure everyone, regardless of age or ability, can engage with these technologies. I went to Dubai a few times, invited as a speaker, and I was talking to a member of the Ministry of Community and Development. And he told me that in the next, by now, 8 years, and at that time was 10 years, they want everyone in the Emirates to be literate in technology from age 0 day to the age of 150 years old, okay? So in conclusion, in my view, digital technologies hold immense potential to engage a society in shaping a more inclusive future. And by focusing on intentional design and providing necessary support for underrepresented groups, I believe we can harness the power of these tools to foster dialogue, inclusion, and sustainable development across generations. And in this, if there is time later on, I would really like to bring some examples of how important the role of sport can be in this regard. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Daniela. We sincerely appreciate that you take the time to share those insights and to give us that motivation. Now, we will move to the next speaker, if I may. I would like to have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Amir Hamza Syed, Associate Manager for Global Advocacy and also a Deputy Sherpa at the Islamic Development Bank. As you all know, but mostly to the distinguished audience connected today, the Islamic Development Bank is a multilateral development finance institution focused on Islamic finance for infrastructure development located in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It comprises 57 member states and does impressive work in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. So without further ado, I would like to present to Mr. Syed the following question, if I may. Have there been success models in promoting an inclusive society through digital power? And if so, what are they? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Let me begin by thanking the excellencies on my left and also who are joining virtually. It's always a pleasure to speak among such high-level dignitaries and try to make justice to the question that you have presented, Alex. And thank you very much for also the generous introduction of the Islamic Development Bank. Let me also add that Islamic Development Bank is a true South-South bank. So all our 57 member countries are from the South, spread across 4 continents across the globe. And so I'm very honored to address this critical topic at the UNITAR Summit of the Future. And this particular theme of today, the intergenerational dialogue, is particularly relevant to our mission at the ISDB, and where we strive to develop and foster inclusive development societies. In fact, it's one of the 2 objectives of the Islamic Development Bank, of the TLN strategy that we have. And leveraging digital technologies to engage different segments of the society. And we've touched upon, youth, and my earlier speaker was saying from 0 to 150 years. So engaging them, and not only that, but at the same time also engaging, vulnerable communities is something that we, specialize in, reaching to the unreached and reaching to the people who cannot be, who are not, factored in the general, programmatic interventions. So you've asked about what are the, successes that we've had, or at least these models that have worked so far in the member countries that we serve. So let me begin by saying, of course, we all agree that digital technologies, they can bridge gaps, they can enhance access, and then they foster economic opportunities. Now, what we thrive is we would like to harness the potential in the sense that any segment of population that we cater to, that should lead to economic enhancement, economic empowerment, increasing access to opportunities, increasing access to income. So any innovative idea or initiative should have an end. So in that sense, the technology should not be a divider, but rather an enabler in terms of reaching the objectives of a particular segment. So some of the examples that we worked on, or we're currently working on. So I'll try to factor them one by one. First is e-commerce and financial inclusion, and that's and that is something that we are working with Pakistan's Easy Pay, Bangladesh Bcash, and at the same time Indonesia's GoPay. Digital education. We've touched upon Madam Pico's example on sports. We are right now working with Turkey's Fatih project, Malaysia's One Best IRR.net, and also with Egypt, the education ministry's e-learning platform, and digital governance. And that this is something, access to public services has been a critical challenge, not only in in our member countries, but at the same time also in several least developed member countries. And so we are right now working with the Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, the Morocco's e-government portal, and as well as Jordan's e-government program. The idea is to bring the public service delivery initiatives onto these platforms, and giving access to the communities in obtaining, for example, say academic certificates, or accreditation, or registration, for example, even for access to public distribution systems, etc. And this is where also moving to the public service delivery, where we are working in the MENA region very closely with the UAE, the Smart Dubai initiative, or the Smart Qatar program, and as well as Oman's e-government services. And one important aspect which I would also like to touch upon is on digital health. And there have been enormous breakthroughs in terms of providing access to telemedicine, and this is where it becomes very challenging for us as we operate in countries like Pakistan, where there are several villages which are in far-reached communities in the mountainous area. So we are working with them on the telemedicine program. We're also working with Tunisia as well as Oman. And last but not the least, the digital infrastructure. I think digital infrastructure, I'll touch upon it a little more on this, particularly from the aspect of privacy, safety, security, and sustainability. I think so this is where we are also working with the UN Office of Special Envoy on telecommunications to make sure that the data privacy and cyber security, and those breaches are not there, but though they don't act as a prohibition, but rather, or restriction, but rather also foster innovation at the same time. And so in this, we are also working very closely with Indonesia's Palaparing project. So overall, to summarize, digital technologies can transform various sectors, and we've seen, several results, including financial inclusion, governance, education, public services, health, infrastructure. But while investing in digital technologies and infrastructure is critical, and then there's another very important pillar which is where UNITAR specializes in, which is capacity building and digital literacy, right? And this is where, three items are critical. First is contextual relevance. How relevant is a digital technology to that particular context? Two, cultural sensitivity. And the many examples that I give from our own programs where cultural sensitivity, if it's not factored in, no matter how cutting edge the digital technology is, it's very difficult to adapt. Number three is ongoing evaluation. The evaluation is critical, right? So some of the programs or some of the examples that have worked have this particular aspect built in from day one. So what is working, what is not working, which segment is adapting which technology, and if something works in some country and something doesn't work in another cultural context, why is it not working? So factoring in evaluation is very vital. And finally, bridging gaps and enhancing economic opportunities, targeting the marginalized communities, targeting the vulnerable, targeting the unreached is an important aspect in the overall, success of digital initiatives. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks to you, Mr. Stiev. Thank you for allowing us to think on the right perspective for development and particularly the role of capacity building in that quest. Much appreciated. May I have now the pleasure of inviting as a speaker Ms. Munahil Sultana, who's a master's degree candidate at Georgetown University. Before I present the question to you, Ms. Sultana, a warm welcome. Georgetown is also my alma mater, and I do know the quality of its education, and particularly the quality of the motivation so the next generation can actually be part of that future. So with that auspicious knowledge, let me present the following question to you. As we come to the closing of this discussion, what is one concrete action that each of us can take, whether in government, business, academia, civil society, non-profit organizations, or simply as a global citizen? What are concrete actions that we can take to harness digital tech for a more inclusive, prosperous, and peaceful world? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. Before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you again to the Division of Prosperity and UNITAR for including me in this discussion and to be able to hear from the esteemed speakers. And I think you touched on Georgetown's point quite accurately. We talk a lot in our master's program about how it's a combination of theory and practice. And when we're having dialogue of including the next generation, including youth in a lot of these practices, I think that combination of theory and practice is one thing that we've been missing for quite some time. And it's one of the things that I think we can all move forward for. So when I'm looking at, what kind of actions we can all take, especially to have that intergenerational dialogue, I would kind of break it up into three parts. I think having that dialogue is one of the most important facets to be able to include young people at the same table as people who have a lot of wisdom to share, as we mentioned earlier. But I think the second point of that is to have a level of understanding. One thing that I really take away from my time as a master's degree student is there are issues in the world that have not affected me personally because they were simply done before I was born, that I don't have a clear understanding about. And that's where that understanding component came in. You mentioned earlier a little bit more about the Cold War. And I think for someone who was born in 2002, not to make myself sound very young, but a time after that, it's very difficult to get a comprehensive understanding of what that world was like if we don't take the initiative to develop that understanding ourselves. So as necessary as dialogue is, I think understanding is a second component of that, to be able to make sure that we are understanding not only from our peers, but also from those who might be of a different generation to us. And I think the third component of it is to create an action plan. And I think we as a younger generation, those who are looking into diplomacy, those who are looking into entering this world and making a difference on an international scale, sometimes that action component feels like it can be lost. One of the first things you mentioned in this panel was, how do the young people feel when we're talking about a lot of these issues? And to be quite honest, as someone who's 22, hoping to enter into the world of diplomacy, it can feel hopeless. And I think a big reason why it feels hopeless at times is because we don't necessarily understand how the world works. We talked a little bit about the intersection of government, of business, of academia, nonprofit, and civil society. And for a lot of us, it's difficult to see how those different partnerships emerge. It's difficult to see how the public and private sector emerges. And that goes back to my point about understanding, where I think when we're having a lot of these discussions of dialogue, as important as it is to have them on key issues, on topic areas that are of importance to us, it's also important to kind of look at it from a bird's eye point of view and see where are those intersections that we may not have thought of before, and how can we create new partnerships and forge new technologies that can combine all of our efforts together. And I think last but not least, one thing that I really had taken away in my time of learning about international relations, of participating not only in this event, but in my master's program in foreign service, is the importance of being uncomfortable. I came into this program knowing that I'm hoping to be a diplomat at the end, doing Model United Nations for the last 10 years, but knowing there are key facets of diplomacy that I'm uncomfortable with. And I think one aspect that we tend to shy away from is when we have our strengths listed out in front of us, we tend to grow our strengths and not necessarily our weaknesses. And I think that makes us weaker global citizens at the end of the day, because we tend to have key issue areas that we don't know a lot about. So as we're looking to have a more prosperous and inclusive society, I think focusing on our weaknesses, looking into our dialogues, having a level of understanding, and creating action plans for comprehensive solutions together are ways that we can have that intergenerational dialogue and hopefully be able to impact the world the way that we want to.
Thank you very much. Yes. There you have it. I don't have to say much.
Thank you.
But we wish you success in what will be such an altruistic quest. We need more diplomats like you. And we know that at the UN. If you ever want to work in Geneva, it's easy to try that. There are two divisions ready to work on. Very good. If I can wrap up, because we will move now to what I believe is the most important part of this round table, which is the Q&A. And I will introduce the person moderating the Q&A, but let me start in 60 seconds. What a privilege to get to hear from someone speaking as a senior ambassador Gallegos, wrap up full circle with someone representing the younger generation in what indeed should be an intergenerational dialogue for a sustainable future. But very important to get to hear the lessons from Hiroshima, much appreciated, the lessons from Daniela in terms of an inclusive social development and social policy, for that sake, the lessons, the comments from Mr. Syed on the role of financing for development, particularly on the right approach to development, very important indeed, in what we hope is indeed a holistic, comprehensive, inclusive process ahead. The Summit of the Future has to give us that guidance. The Summit of the Future is going to produce these seminal documents that will lead us towards 2030 and beyond. Mr. Seth was very much involved and one of the leaders of all those proceedings around 3 years of what was at the time called the post-2015 agenda that produced Agenda 2030 for development. Now, he has recently told us, correctly so, the process will start again. And the process that will take again more than a couple of years to adopt whatever will replace the Sustainable Development Goals. And what we are, I guess, will call today the post-2030 process. That new roadmap that the UN will foster has to include a intergenerational dialogue. So thank you to all of the speakers. Thank you again, Ambassador Picot, for hosting us in this beautiful permanent mission of yours. And without further ado, allow me to now introduce the moderator for the Q&A session. To my left, Mr. Shang Li, a student at Wharton School, no less, at the University of Pennsylvania, who will lead us.
Thank you. So thank you to the UNITAR Division for Prosperity. Thank you to the UNITAR Division for People and Social Inclusion. Thank you to our UNITAR New York office. I'm Sean. I'm an alumni for the Youth Ambassador Asia Pacific program organized by the Division for Prosperity. And also thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights. So as Mr. Seth mentioned, earlier on, the importance of incorporating young people in the conversation is critical as we shape a more inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous future. Therefore, today I have a few questions on behalf of the youth around the world that we will ask our panelists, which earlier on we've sent out a survey to everyone, all youth respondents around the world, to gather some statistics and some questions that they have. We'll also be monitoring any questions that come in the live stream platforms. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce next to me, Riri, who will start us off with the first question.
Yep, so well, my name is Riri, and I'm really glad to be here today. I'm also a UNITAR professor. I have a few questions in mind. So, as mentioned previously about new tech and AI, we can really use that to bridge the gap between the youth and aging popularity. I was wondering how there's also like problems and challenges that we may face adjusting to information, like AI bias as well as how can we use it so that the problems don't mitigate the benefits, and how we can use that the technology.
That's a very important question, I guess, and thank you very much. First of all, like I'm also a strong believer of the use of the AI, also some generative AI as well. But I think one of the key questions to the world is how we can use it properly. And we've been also like be exposed to some societies and situations where the generative AI is used in the false manner. Like, they're making fun of somebody who doesn't be exposed and so on. So that's why like we may have something clear rule how we can use the images of somebody and also created image by the AI. So that's, I think, the utmost importance, maybe the immediate need is actually creating some regulations or some rulings, how we can use the steps of technologies for the development.
If I may, I thank you for that question, because Daniela knows through sports, athletes are often attacked online. So it was very difficult, but years ago we managed to have some wording in the conclusion of the Commission of Statutes of Freedom, because female athletes are even more attacked than male athletes. So I think we go back to what you were saying before. When we create those algorithms, it's not for tissues. If you don't put the correct data, and a big company will ask for candidatures, if there is not the thing of gender equality, you will have 99% male candidates that are retained. So what you were saying, I attended a side event at the UN with Eric Schmidt, and he was explaining my African colleagues that thanks to AI, they will be able to, through their Ministry of Education, really pinpoint what they want to put in their programs and how to accelerate formation of even more, not classical education, but to prepare people for having a living. So it's all about data, and that's why I think that this report that I haven't read yet, that I cannot wait to read it, that has been published today on governing AI for humanity is so important, because we need to go back to basics. What do you feed the system with? And if we don't start with that, we will keep the divide being more divide. And also, it's good to talk about all those technologies, and you mentioned that about environment issues, those big data centers, they need to use a lot of water. So this is really another really important aspect to take into account, because you cannot take away the water that people need for their living, to maintain those machines. So there are so many things. That's why I think that we all need to take together. The UN, I think, is the biggest convening body to set up a line of conduct, if I may. I don't even go as far as talking about policies, but without the private sector, the creative people, and education like you're coming from two of the best universities in the world. So we need to all get together, because we have only one planet. And as Ambassador Gallegos was saying, and my colleague from Japan, the world is aging. It's not only in your country, it's in Europe, it's the same. So we need to find new ways and to put less strength on the planet and to empower people. But because we won't avoid the development of AI, we have to prevent it for servicing only a very little fragment of our society. That's my goal.
I'm actually going to put a question to the younger people. Because on AI applications, especially generative AI, I feel it's of course based on data, and you regurgitate available data through various sources and put it in a form which is usable and practical. But what does it do to blue sky thinking? What does it do to innovation? What does it do to creativity? Is it a friend of creativity and innovation and blue sky thinking? Or do you, for example, in writing your tutorials or your projects, use that excessively, and your own input, your own thinking input into how you can enrich what you write? Is that being affected? A particle physicist who uses generative AI to learn more about the God particle or something like that will get information that's available, right? But they won't be able to think creatively or innovatively or differently on these issues. So my question to you is AI a friend or enemy of creativity, innovation, and blue sky thinking?
I would say both, honestly. I say both because as a student in the last 2 years or so, almost every classroom discussion on syllabus day starts off with AI. I just had my first week at Georgetown a few weeks ago, and all of our classroom discussions started off with what ways can we use AI in and what ways do we have to be careful. And I think at times it can be a friend. I think there are avenues in which our generation has used AI to either check work or to be able to expand our thinking in ways that we haven't thought of before. But I think some of the dangers of AI, as you mentioned, is it stops us from being creative. It stops us from thinking outside of the box. And we see that a lot in the way that students are using them for application essays. They're using them for their theses throughout the world. We see the way that a lot of times AI has constricted the way that we think. And one of my professors said it in a really beautiful way, and I kind of wanted to share that and quote her a little bit. She mentioned that when we're using an algorithm like ChatGPT, when we're using something like that to draft up a speech or an essay, we're thinking of the average. We're looking at all the data that has been collected, and we are simply at the 50% mark of what is out there. And one thing that she told us about Georgetown is if Georgetown is the university that's supposed to be #1 in the world for foreign policy, we are not the average. And she said that to us in the beginning, kind of as a joke, but also to reiterate that idea in our head that AI can be used as a tool to help serve as reminders, to help be your friend in certain ways and accelerate your progress. But if we rely on it solely for the ways that our brain would have those neurons firing anyway, we tend to rely on it too much to the point where our creativity doesn't spark that. So to answer your question, I think our generation has a lot to figure out in which ways we can use it as a tool, but also figure out in which ways we can reinvent the wheel and use it as a supplement for some of the creative processes that we need to have anyway as adults.
May I? May I? I would like to. I'm sorry. Can I intervene?
Yes, of course.
I think we are in a situation where we are having extraordinary advances in technology that can be a great step in the right direction to aid persons in having more sustainable lives, better capacity, more activities. For persons with disabilities, it is extraordinary the capacities they can acquire in their workplace and in their life. The same for seniors. But it also involves a series of other dangers, I would say, not to qualify them as all as negative, but we are learning that each one of us has an algorithm. And the mechanism by which artificial intelligence is using these algorithms have a very preoccupying lining. I think the High Commission for Human Rights and others have manifested very uniquely that we have to have algorithms that do not discriminate, that are not xenophobic, that do not marginalize minorities. Because if the machine is integrated with algorithms that exclude people from regions because of their race, sex, religion, or others, we will have a more disintegrated society. So I think one of the principal issues is to have AI as a tool, have AI as a complement, and have AI have a more important basis of work that has to have a non-discriminatory basis. that is a very challenging aspect, as we all have these markers. And I think that one of the principal issues that we must do is to have a world that is more unique and leveled for all players around the world. So I think that that is one of the bigger challenges of using technology and AI as we are talking now. Thank you.
I raised my hand a teeny bit ago. Do you think I can share my thoughts?
Of course.
Thank you. Thanks. So I can lower my hand now. Right. Two or three things very quickly. Also to the last intervention from the younger future diplomat, the gentle lady who's 22 years old. You spoke about the private sector. So very briefly, in my view, of course, the private sector has to make profit, right? And so how can we talk about being fair also when it comes to drawing business strategies, etc., etc.? Well, I think that maybe sometimes it would be good to do what some indigenous tribes do. When the elderly meet, they ask themselves, the decision we're taking now, what kind of impact is it going to have on the next generation, 7 generations to come? So that's a very interesting question. So, what I'm trying to say here is that the private sector should also start thinking in the long run, long terms. And so when it comes to the profit, whenever decisions are taken, the question could be how this service, this product, yes, makes revenues, but is going to benefit the people and the planet. And this conversation, it would be great if it could take place somewhere. So to hear the voice of the private sector asking itself this question and see what the private sector answers. So to make profit, but at the same time, making sure that whatever is offered benefits the people and the planet. The second thing I would like to say is that, again, this lady spoke about using creativity and imagination. Also, other speakers said that, but she said it as a youth who has lots of creativity. I mean, we all used to be extremely creative because the energy changes depending on the age and the experiences too. So I would like to bring back to the United Nations and bring back the United Nations to the principles on which the Charter was created: social justice, human rights, and peace, with the leap of imagination, benefiting of the energy of present and future generations to recreate policies that bring us to where we needed to be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vance. Thank you. Thank you to all panelists who answered that question. Well, I think based on what some of our panelists mentioned, we heard about, the potential risk of AI bias. We heard about, using GPT in assignments, whether AI is a friend or is it risky for us. But, obviously we never anticipated, or maybe we did anticipate, but we never expected, technology to advance and to, change so quickly. So one of the questions that I saw coming in is that, considering the rapid pace of technological advancement, how can we ensure that the digital skills, taught to youth today remain relevant in the future, avoiding a new generation of digital illiteracy? And I think this is open to all panelists.
In Monaco, they have started to teach small children to code. So for me, it's, I think the brain of the younger generation is different. So it's an evolution. And I don't know if it will slow down or it will go even faster. But again, we go back to the basics of education. And how do you balance what you were saying about and you were also mentioning being so young and not really knowing how the world was. I still remember my son, who was born just 5 years before you, said to me, "You didn't have a phone, you know, you didn't have a cell phone when," and I still remember when I first arrived at the UN, I was running to the telephone booth, but actually you had people when you would call answering you. Now, if you don't text, people don't answer you. It's becoming, it has an impact also. So it goes beyond staying at the level of what we need to do, but also not losing our humanity in doing so. So, but please, what do you think? Because it goes so fast.
I think, sorry. I think the point you raise is one that we all have to be worried about inevitably. There is a little bit of a digital divide that we already see between my generation and my nieces and nephew, for example. I still struggle sometimes to answer my email correctly, and my nephew can go on TikTok and find a perfect algorithm. So I think that divide will happen naturally, and it is inevitable. And it's very true. I mean, I think this, especially COVID, had such an impact on the way that a younger generation used technology and the way that they had access to it. But I think a big part of not only providing access, not only providing access is also ensuring, going back to one of the points that was mentioned before, that the access is equitable, but it also comes free of biases. And I think we as individuals in this global society, we all have a certain bias in our communities. To not be cognizant of that and to be able to use technology with that is a danger to the world. And I think if we're thinking about how we can ensure this technology and this literacy is available for generations beyond our own, beyond the younger generation, we have to understand what those biases are present today, how we've been able to utilize the world, how we've been able to see the impact of this, whether it's been beneficial or whether it's been failures in certain aspects, and ensure that some of these biases are corrected for the future generations. And I think a big part of it comes from us being open to talking about failures. I think a lot of times what I've noticed, at least in the education system that I've grown up in, is sometimes it's difficult to admit that we as a society have failed. We have failed when it comes to global warming. We have failed when it comes to certain occupations throughout the world. We failed in numerous aspects of our international policy, and it's hard to talk about at times. But I think in order for us to be able to ensure that the generations that come 2, 3, or even 7 generations from now are able to understand from our mistakes, it's to accept that we failed, accept where those biases are, and see how we can correct them from moving forward.
I think digital skilling, digital literacy is not a one-off exercise. The speed of change is so fast that we have to be constantly reskilling on digital issues. So it's not as if we've done one course once and we are set for life. We've got to be aware that every 3, 4, 5 months, we need to go through more reskilling to be able to be in touch with the advances in technology.
Yes, I mean, if I may add, complementing, I think this is where you have different stakeholders coming in. I think pulling in the best practices, pulling in the resources, because so you'd have the government embedding, the policies in the national ecosystem, for example. Now, if that is not up to date with what's progressing in the private sector, so you would see what the situation, what Mr. Nikhil has mentioned. So you would have people who are digitally literate, but not at the level that is anticipated, or that is expected, for example. And now in the same way, so you'd have non-profit sector, the civil society, which sort of does digital literacy programs on its own, while the linkage to the national ecosystem or to the private sector is not up to date. So then again, there would be some gap that we may see, that we see. So I think it's important to have a global cooperation in that space. And this is, and discussions like these, knowledge sessions like these is one of the ways in which we can sort of address. And these are very important tools, to be able to, get an opportunity to identify the gaps that we have, and then also identify the ways in which we can fill those gaps.
So hopefully UN is still relevant to bring people together under this.
So I think we'll, because of time constraints, we'll, kind of wrap up with one last question, which just came in through the chat. To all of our panelists, how can we build a okay. I think actually I will actually refer to some statistics for this question, but in the chat, someone asked, how can we balance the growth of digital infrastructure with the need of protecting the privacy and security of users, especially vulnerable populations? In fact, actually, in the statistics throughout the survey that we sent through, over 60% of the respondents believe, digital platforms would be a great platform to kind of connect people, whether it's different ages or different people from different regions, different generations. But one of the biggest concerns raised was the misinformation and the privacy problem as addressed. So, I want to ask our panelists, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Technology.
Again, I think the UN is a unique, in a unique position to set up the basic rules. Let's hope that the Global Digital Compact is just the first step, that through that report that has just been issued, member state will prepare some sort of documentation. So I'm still hopeful, because otherwise it's going to be fragmented. We already have rules in the EU. It's all those issues of privacy, security. Who around that table has not received an email from a healthcare provider, bank, or whatever that your data has been hacked? Protect yourself. So, do you believe in the UN power to play a role in that future of getting countries around the globe on a more just, equitable position, so we don't enlarge even more the digital divide?
I do. I think there's something to be said about the creation of the United Nations. And I think in academia, we talk about it a lot, of the difference between the League of Nations and how the UN was formed. And there's such beauty, if you think of it, of the fact that member states are able to convene together and learn from one another in a way. But I think when it comes to emerging technologies and things that there is an imbalance between the member states who are existing at the UN, there are certain mechanisms that we can learn from one another. And to go back to the question in terms of the balance, I think one of the important things that we've talked about a little bit is transparency and how these algorithms exist and how they function. And as someone who has researched a little bit about it but doesn't have a huge foundation, I can recognize that transparency what we are consuming. And I think as a consumer of different kinds of technology, that's one thing that I'm very aware of is, one day I'll say that I need to buy a water bottle, and the next thing you know, I get an ad online about a water bottle. And it seems a little bit confusing at times of how is everything that I'm looking at intertwined and connected, as I mentioned earlier. But I think having that transparency in algorithms kind of goes hand in hand to that digital literacy that we were talking about. And I think between the different member states, the types of data protection laws that exist between each state are definitely something that we can learn from one another from. But it is also something that we will have to make trial and error to figure out what has worked for certain member states and how that can apply to others as well.
Very good. Unfortunately, we have short time. We take all the panelists, but allow me to particularly recognize Mr. Shan Lee for being here with us, for leading this Q&A period, and for the smooth way in which the proceedings have happened today. So without further ado, and for the last part of this agenda, allow me to introduce my colleague, Ms. Mihoko Kumamoto, the Director of the Division for Prosperity at UNITAR, and the main organizer of this event. Mihoko.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was told to come to here at the podium. So, well, thank you very, very much. Ambassador Isabel Pico, Ambassador Osamu Yamanaka, Ambassador Luis Gallegos, Nikio, Amir, Muna, and Mr. Shimada from Hiroshima, and of course Sean, Alex, and Marco, and Danielle, and everyone participating in person and online. Once again, thank you very, very much. I wish we could have much more time. But actually, our division, Prosperity Division, is organizing a 24-hour hackathon on different topics. But I think we could do something 24-hour hackathon on the same topic. I truly, truly enjoyed this very insightful discussion, and I really hope everyone in person and also online also enjoyed this very constructive discussion. And once again, it has been a great pleasure and honor to have representatives from diverse segments of society, youth, elders, population with disabilities, national, local governments, international organization, multilateral development bank, civil society. So it has been, once again, true honor and pleasure. Digital technology, we discussed so many different aspects of course, as we said, it could facilitate conversation, remove barriers, infrastructure barrier, language barrier, so many different things. And Muna, you mentioned about the importance of dialogue, understanding, and also coming up with concrete action plan. I'm sure many of us completely agree. And also importance of partnership, particularly the private sector, civil society, that's absolutely crucial. Simultaneously, majority of panelists mentioned about cons or risks of digital technologies, including disinformation, misinformation, algorithm bias. And also, as Ambassador Pico mentioned, still 2.6 billion people, which is about 33% of the entire population, still do not have access to internet. So there is this severe digital divide. So it is absolutely imperative to narrow such digital divide. And as Amir mentioned, digital technology could be used to promote many aspects of development, economic growth, and also health, you mentioned, financial aspects, so on and so forth. And Mr. Shimada mentioned about using digital technology to visualize and pass down memory from the current generation to the future generation. For example, memories from Hiroshima, which is extremely, extremely important for future generations, our generation and future generations to remember. Once again, this has been tremendously insightful, productive dialogue. Thank you so much once again. Last but not the least, on behalf of UNITAR, I would actually express the appreciation to the co-organizers of this side event, the government of Monaco, Ecuador, and Japan. Thank you so much. And also, dear UNITAR colleagues, members from Division for People, Alex, and also Marco, members from New York office, many of them are sitting here, and my dear colleagues, members from Division for Prosperity. Thank you so much once again. Thank you. This concludes the slide.
We wanted to have a picture of the speaker, so you can join us. You are the most important. Come behind.